about it for well over a year now, that New York used to be a model, that people used to look to New York. He has told that story about the Clinton administration and his time in it before, when he would go out to Kansas where they couldn't pronounce his name and thought his accent was funny, and people were excited about New York and looked to New York as a leader.
But there were a couple things. I mean, first of all, he set up, or he's proposing today to set up several committees or panels, or call them what you will, to look at Medicaid, to look at education. So on some of the really big, tough policy issues, he's sort of setting up these committees involving all of the special interests, the public, to sort of try and get buy-in on it. And the other theme, it seemed to me, that came across was this notion of competition. We were talking during the speech. He spent about $1 billion today in that speech for all these different competitions that he's setting up for money.
And he certainly didn't, identify $1 billion in revenue. You know, the old saying was that if you want to ignore a problem, create a commission. It's very easy to be cynical about that. I used the line earlier by saying, this is a plan to make plans. But I think that there's a little bit of ingenuousness in it, too, because he needs not only to create details of what needs to be done, more important, he needs to create a consensus, not only among the public, but among the power brokers.
Absolutely. There was actually, what was amazing, and you guys were talking about it, I don't have the experience of covering Mario Cuomo. You did, Larry, when you were at Newsday, and you lived through the Mario Cuomo. Were you in government at that time, Steve?
I was working for the Assembly for most of the Cuomo reign, and was in the Comptroller's office for the end of it.
And what you said, I thought, was very striking. He's funny. He's a funny guy. Funnier than Mario, right?
Mario was very funny in private. But in public,
never.
What you heard was the Andrew at the end, where he was, transformed the podium into a pulpit, where he put aside whatever notes or script he had and spoke from the heart, from the gut. That was Mario Cuomo.
We have this clip that actually I thought was very funny, and I think we're going to try and play it. Hopefully we've got it here. I'm sorry, we do not have it. We have a little bit of a technical glitch. We will come back to it, but it was the battleship clip. And Larry, you said not as funny unless he's narrating it, which I agree, but hopefully it will translate well when and if we get it. Go ahead, Steve.
No, I was going to say, I have one criticism of the speech, which is he had said in advance this was not going to be your typical State of the State address with a checklist where you go down the box and check off all the various constituencies. He did it in a very clever way. He did it in a different way. But yeah, there was the checklist from same-sex marriage to environment.
But he gave that very short shrift. It was one sentence, and I've checked that box, and now I'm out of here.
But that's exactly what he said he wasn't going to do, and to a certain extent, he did it. He hit environment. He hit minority and women-owned businesses. He hit education. He hit public higher education.
Some things he didn't talk about, though. He didn't talk about energy. He didn't talk about incentivizing energy, which is something, for example,
green jobs seems to be part of the energy umbrella, but I think you're right.
But not a big focus on getting off fossil fuel and that kind of thing. So that was an area he didn't talk about. He did talk about jobs. He didn't talk about infrastructure. He didn't talk a lot about the crumbling infrastructure that the state has seen. He didn't really talk that much about the environment, actually, not about saving open space, which is a big Pataki thing, obviously. I mean, look, it's true. The state doesn't have a lot of money. You can't buy open space when the state doesn't have any money. I am understanding that we have that clip. I do want to play the clip if we have an opportunity to do so.
Right now, the budget process is like ships passing in the night. Hold on a second. Bring those ships back. I think I recognized someone. Zoom in on that man on that battleship. Yes, it is. Senate Majority Leader Dean Skelos. And look, it's Commander Sheldon Silver. Oh, and there I am. And here are the special interest groups within...
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that is your governor, the 56th governor of the state of New York.
Probably the funniest moment ever in a State of the State address.
Of the State of the State. Can you imagine doing that in the vaulted assembly chamber?
No, well, he couldn't because of the technology, which we spoke about at the top of the show. But also, I mean, jokes in the State of the State, right? There's humor. I mean, certainly David Paterson was a funny guy. He's not still with us, obviously. He's not the governor anymore. But he made some jokes. He liked to do some quips and asides. It was his way of diffusing tense situations. This is probably going to be a tense situation. You're going to have a budget battle. Everyone understands that. Right. What he's trying to do, I think, is send this message. Yes, we're going to fight, but let's not get out of control. You know, let's understand that we should all play nice.
But there was a real hardcore message there, which was the special interests flying in and attacking what I do. And we know that he set up this committee on the outside. He is not going to make the mistake that Eliot Spitzer, George Pataki, and even Mario Cuomo made, which is to allow the special interests to attack his budget without being ready to retaliate.
Well, what you're talking about is the Committee to Save New York. Is that what you mean?
Yep.
Right. Okay. Well, we're actually going to be, we've spoken to some of those principals. Steve Spinola from REBNY, the Real Estate Board of New York, has been here. We're going to be speaking to Ken Adams, who's the State Business Council head. And it's very interesting, though, because this is an outside committee that is raising at least $10 million to basically have Andrew Cuomo's back in the budget battle.
In other words, it's a special interest lobbying group.
It is indeed a special interest lobbying group. Right on the nose there.
But this thing about lobbyists, I've killed millions of trees writing about the actions of lobbyists and the like. But the reality is that a lobbyist is bad if they are lobbying against something that you want or need. A lobbyist is good if they're lobbying for something that, against something that you don't want to happen.
Who's running the campaign, though? We should just note this. Dan Marino, is that what you were going to say?
John Marino and
Dan Marino. He's a football player.
Yeah, he is.
He's not running this campaign.
And Billy Cunningham, two former chairmen / executive directors of the state party, very close with the governor. Right. And then on the inside of the governor's administration, you have Drew Zambelli, who was the governor's pollster in the campaign.
No, the old
maestro
governor.
of the message.
And he was the pollster for Governor Cuomo.
That's
in this campaign.
Yeah, I don't want to be cynical about this. I mean, I think that this is a real smart move on the part of the governor to be willing to raise more money, use some of his campaign funds, because the reality is that even the most popular of governors, once he gets through the budget process, usually is down in the high 30s in approval because he's angered so many different people, which brings us to the central conundrum here. Most people, and you see this in your polling, we've seen it in some of the polls we've done at Hofstra, people want to cut taxes, but they don't want to cut any spending that they know anything about. That tends to be their schools, which can have a direct impact, by the way, on the value of their property.
Right.
They don't want to cut the ability of their local hospital. They don't want to limit the ability to have good roads and parks. So, I mean, I think that this is a shrewd move on his part, but in the end, it may be very difficult to rally the people.
He also did something that I thought was interesting.
If he doesn't do that, though, if he doesn't rally the people, then he's toast.
But the question is, rally them to what? What is he capable of forming a consensus around? That's the interesting question.
He created some competition, which is interesting, right? There are two competitions that he talked about. He talked about putting local governments to compete against one another for consolidation. And for economic development funds, and for consolidation funds, and schools. It's kind of an interesting concept. You say, for example, you can, school, have extra aid, or maybe we will allocate your aid based on how well you improve student performance and how well you cut your administrative costs. Well, that puts School A in perhaps a low-income urban environment that has difficulty with kids who are performing to begin with, against School B that has more resources and kids who are testing higher. Now, okay, if it's based on student performance, how are you going to control for the economic realities
and when
of
you
that
have
district?
Wealthy school districts that can afford consultants to write up grants to compete among themselves and have the poorer districts.
Yeah, I don't think the legislature is going to go for that.
Well, the other question is, where does this $500 million come from? Is it new money over and above what the districts would normally get by formula, or because that would make it a carrot, or is it going to be taken out of the existing pool of school aid? Then it becomes a stick.
Well, and who knows? Because I mean, there is the assumption that he's going to cut school aid in the budget, because how do you close a $10 billion gap without making cuts in the second largest program in state spending?
Right. And how do you make cuts based on the school aid formulas now when the Senate Majority Leader is from Long Island, which has a history of fighting for every cent. They also have a history of having some of the best school districts in the country.
And
how do you do that?
And we're also back to the fact that we have the traditional, or what had been for